The United States is doing poorly. It's been doing poorly for a long time, and it's getting worse and worse.
Right now, our attention is almost exclusively on America's handling of the coronavirus pandemic, with a sharp focus on the repeated blunders that have given the US the highest infection rate in the world. But that misses the bigger picture.
There's a crisis that's been building for a long time that exists regardless of coronavirus. And that is an economic crisis or a socioeconomic crisis, a crisis in healthcare, and a crisis in government.
These are indicators of what economists call a failed state, a nation on the brink of collapse. The term is as grim as it sounds. It's usually reserved for countries ravaged by a corrupt government, civil war, or even genocide.
Well, what are some of the key predictors of state failure? And one of the things that keeps coming up the most is essentially ethnic conflict.
To this day, African Americans have a lower average household income than white Americans. They face higher unemployment, employment discrimination, double standards in the criminal justice system, and racism in all its other forms.
And the United States is increasingly less a multicultural state in any positive sense, in any successful sense, and increasingly more a state divided along ethnic conflict. Now, why is that? Well, the headlines are police brutality, disenfranchisement of various minorities, and there's something to those headlines.
But minority groups are not the only ones feeling this growing inequality. While the US did until recently enjoy record low unemployment and a steadily growing economy, the top 1% absorbed most of the wealth.
People in concentrated geographic areas are not having basic human needs and wants met. And that makes it incredibly unsurprising when you also see that these are many of the same hotspots where there are high levels of crime, which is a very good indicator of state failure.
Despite America's status as the largest economy in the world, its infrastructure, education, and healthcare have all been in consistent decline. The US is now 34th among all nations, and perhaps the most critical measure of all, life expectancy.
But if you actually add the amount of money its government spends per person with what people spend themselves, so public and private sector, it spends way more money than any other country on earth per person and has some of the worst health outcomes in the OECD.